Welcome once again to Auto Mundial, the weekly home of all the latest motoring news and reviews. This week, Chevrolet slaps off-road suspension, beefed-up motors and massive wheels to its all-electric Silverado pickup and sends it racing.
We've also got a fun farewell to the Mark V Toyota Supra.
Plus, German executives are all well and good, but let's see what the French have to offer.
That is all coming up. First though, the news.
Captur, Arcana, Symbioz, Rafale, Austral. When it comes to the number of internal combustion SUVs in its range, Renault really takes the biscuit, and worse still, no one really knows what they all do differently. Well, even Renault is beginning to accept its flaws and has announced that one of its 5 high-riding, petrol-burning, family-ferrying products will not be getting a replacement. Now that its production has ended and is being phased out of its lineup, the French manufacturer has officially confirmed that the Renault Arcana will not be getting a new version, nor will it be making a switch to EV tech. The Arcana was Renault's coupe version of the Captur, built upon the more compact CMF-B platform. Though with its extended rear end and sloped roof, it failed to be both spacious inside and practical in tighter situations, and so it was always our least favourite Renault SUV. The Renault SUV range is still very bolstered here in the UK, but at least the car maker is showing signs of tidying its clutter here on the UK market.
A cultural icon, more so for its IMDb page than its out-and-out prowess, the Toyota Supra is a fan favourite across the automotive passion. And so, when the name made its resurgence in 2020, after 17 years in the limbo that is every motoring film produced, enthusiasts around the world fell into a frenzy, hoping their domestic market would get a slice of the front-engined, rear-driven sports coupe in its 5th generation. Since then, and despite criticism concerning its developmental tie-ins with the BMW Z4, the Mark V Supra has gained a following in its own right as a capable driver's car. But sadly, after 6 years sitting on Toyota shelves, the so-called A90 generation model will bid farewell to the production line at the end of 2025. And so, in celebration of the model, and not at all in a last-ditch manoeuvre to ship the last few unsold chassis, Toyota is launching this, the GR Supra Mark V Final Edition. Now, we know what you're thinking. This is just going to be another special edition sporting nothing more than a unique livery that your local body shop could replicate for tuppence, all with an inflated price tag. Well, that is only sort of true. In reality, this matte black livery with GR decals inspired by Toyota's international racing teams is part of a further optional package dubbed the GT4 Style Pack. But that isn't to say that the final edition doesn't have the odd trick up its sleeve, or within its wheel arches, that is. Hidden behind these new 19-inch wheels is a set of larger, more capable Brembo brake discs, as well as returned traction settings. The whole car gets an alignment tweak for greater grip on the corners. The chassis gains stiffness from additional bracing, while new KW suspension is shared with the Supra's GT4 racing variant. Under the bonnet, it's still the same 3-litre turbocharged straight-six, though here producing 429 brake horsepower. Clearly, a lot has gone into Supra's send-off, but then again, if we revisit that inflated price tag we mentioned earlier, you would hope so too. With just 300 examples ever set to leave the factory, the GR Supra Final Edition is set to cost upwards of £120,000. That is twice the price of the standard car. Ouch!
Last week, we checked out the latest full-size executive estate from the Four Rings. A spacious, sleek and sophisticated family car, the Audi A6 Avant, in its newest form, is certainly a model we are excited to track throughout 2025. But where there's an Avant, a saloon is never far behind, and already the German manufacturer has unveiled its A6 in less practical, more streamlined body style. As you would expect, much of the A6 saloon is identical to its raised roof roommate, until you get to the back, that is, where the Avant gets a practical, flat boot top into a cavernous opening. This smaller model isn't quite as welcoming, due to its smaller coupe boot lid. This is why we typically suggest always opting for a model's estate variant, but if you do have your heart set on a saloon, the A6's elegant rear light bar and nicely sloping window is a perfectly good choice. Inside, the drawbacks of a sloping roofline are just as present, with rear passengers getting a little less headroom, but the car still appears to be very welcoming and above all plush inside. From top upholstery and trim materials to a barrage of screens across the dashboard, it's all very modern, it's all very luxurious, and it's all very Audi. But what if you fancy yourself an executive saloon for motorway cruising, but with a bit more flair than the Four Rings' newest addition to its range?
Well, whilst the German Trio and perhaps an Italian or two are the obvious choices, perhaps France has something for you with this, the DS9. A subsidiary of Citroën with an upmarket twist, the DS name has long been a melting pot of comfort and character, and this mean-looking executive is no different. From sharp angles up front to shapely lines across the body and a petite dainty tail, the whole thing decorated with, in our minds, the correct amount of bling, this top-of-the-range French cruiser is evidently all about the looks. Step inside and that showy persona continues with a nicely laid out premium feeling cabin, especially for the front row. Thick plush chairs sit either side of a sizable centre console, doubling up as a leather-clad armrest, whilst the rear seats get a similar layout, though perhaps not quite as cushioned. An equally leathery dashboard features this massive 12-inch screen running DS's own infotainment software, though we would recommend avoiding it as much as possible, instead making the most of phone connectivity. Sadly, with zero physical aircon and radio buttons, you can't avoid it forever. As part of the Stellantis brand, you would indeed expect the DS's key selling points to be its surface appeal. As sharing powertrains with more pedestrian Peugeots, it doesn't get an Audi smooth driving experience. In the past, 3 powertrains were available, but now just the mid-range plug-in hybrid remains, pushing 250 brake horsepower to the front wheels by combining the 1.6-litre engine found in the Peugeot 508, among other things, with a 12 kilowatt-hour battery capable of 45 miles of range. The so-called E-Tense 250 is available from £56,000 in entry-level trim, with the higher Opera edition offering little over the standard car.
At that price, it sits some £6,000 above the cheapest Audi A6 saloon, the Four Rings model benefiting from more affordable mild hybrid tech in its pair of engine offerings. At your disposal are a 2-litre diesel or similar displacement petrol, both of which get the same 200 brake horsepower output. Yet to get a pokier power source, in its current state we would suggest that the Audi does not stack up against the DS9, and so, whilst a left-field choice, the French model deserves a second look in the executive class, in our opinion.
After the break, Mercedes shows off its latest compact saloon. Welcome back. Coming up, this is what an all-electric Baja racer would look like. Fun, huh?
A few weeks ago, we showed you a BMW 1 Series hatchback turned saloon in the form of the 2 Series Gran Coupe, looking to take on the saloon version of Audi's A3. Well, not wanting an affliction of FOMO, Mercedes-Benz is joining the hatch-cum-sportback fun with its all-new CLA. First launched in 2013, the CLA is now in its 3rd generation as an extended version of the A-Class, sporting a saloon roofline and longer boot. Although with a gulping front grille, monobrow light bar and futuristic rear end, you might notice that it looks very little like the current Merc hatchback, and it is because it's the first model entering into a new era of homogenization between combustion and electrification. In fact, this new ugly duckling of a CLA will be available in either all-electric or mild hybrid form, with the two only distinguishing themselves visually by the grille. In all-electric EQ form, the CLA is available in either 250 plus or 350 4MATIC form, good for 270 or 350 brake horsepower respectively, both of which sit on the same 800-volt 85 kWh battery, allowing for up to 430 miles on a charge. That 800-volt architecture means the CLA will go from 10 to 80% charge in just 10 minutes, and an onboard heat pump will optimize the battery's temperature. Several hybrid versions are set to be available, ranging from 135 to 200 brake horsepower, all of which will be based on the same 1.5-litre 4-pot and small electric motor within its 8-speed gearbox, though these hybrid models will reportedly come along later this year. Where the CLA's exterior styling feels a bit more miss than hit, to us, the cabin is a totally different story. Dropping the overwhelming bling and hyperscreen of previous Mercedes models, this new car gets a far more usable interior layout with more subtle details, and that's something we look forward to seeing on more cars wearing the 3-pointed star. An impressive set of stats, the CLA is the first model to sit upon Mercedes' new MMA platform, that is set to introduce a further 4 models over the next 2 years, including a so-called mini G-Wagon.
£30,000 is certainly a lot of money, but in the world of new car buying budgets, it's pretty much the norm. The average new car costing around £35,000 here in the UK. So if you had £30,000 to spend on a brand new electric car, what should you get? Well, based purely on statistics, the newly unveiled Ford Puma Gen E would be the obvious go-to, presenting as the all-electric version of the UK's yearly bestseller. In fact, in 2024, we bought over 48,000 of the petrol-burning variant. And with the starting price of just under £30,000, we would expect the electric Puma to continue that success. The newest Blue Oval EV gets slightly retuned looks for a more streamlined body, but overall it's still the same compact crossover UK consumers have come to love. Under the floor sits a 43 kilowatt-hour battery powering a single motor on the front axle with a little over 160 brake horsepower. Despite a wheezy figure, electric torque sends the Gen E to 62 in a Puma ST rivaling 8 seconds, whilst it will top out at 100 miles per hour. The powertrain will get you up to 233 miles on a charge with 100 kW fast charges, boosting the battery from 10 to 80% in 23 minutes, matching the industry average. For what we would imagine to be the Gen E's primary use, Ford announces a city driving range of over 320 miles. That anything above 300 is commendable in our eyes. Inside, this latest addition to the roster goes the same way as other Blue Oval EVs, with its compact yet elegant cabin full of screens running the latest infotainment software, squared-off steering wheel and plenty of storage bins. In fact, the boot's cavernous 570 litres is accompanied by several hidden pockets and bins throughout the dashboard. It's not just your phone and coffee cups that sit comfortably aboard the Puma, however, as despite its tight dimensions, the Puma is a spacious little crossover, perfect for families of 4. There's no denying, however, that when your children start to outgrow their booster seats, they will also soon outgrow the Ford's compact rear seats. So with that in mind, why not plan ahead and get something a little more spacious for even less money?
This is the MG S5 EV, and despite marketing its new crossover as a B-segment car, its dimensions very much tell a slightly larger story. An extra 200mm to the wheelbase and a taller, flatter roof mean rear passengers aboard the newest MG SUV will feel far more comfortable than in the Puma. That being said, boot space does suffer, dropping the equivalent of some 2 carry-on bags versus the Ford. As we say, the MG is a little cheaper than the Ford, hitting the market from £28,500, though for that price you do only get the base spec SE model sporting a 49 kilowatt-hour battery. Jump to just under £31,000 and the battery boost to 64 kilowatt-hours, which will mean just about reaching that targeted 300-mile range, though still missing out on the Puma's total. Charging to 80% also takes a little longer than the Ford. In either case, the cabin gets a central 13-inch central touchscreen with built-in apps plus wireless phone connectivity and a further 10.25-inch driver display. A trend we're starting to see in the car market in 2025 is the return to physical buttons for the most used features, and that's also the case in the MG S5. Once you take a closer look at the cabin's upholstery, you do eventually realise that you're paying Puma money for a larger car, and so texture quality may not be as satisfying, nor will the central screen be as responsive. For a more rough and ready model with a little more space for activities, we do like the MG. Though lacking the refinement of its rival, it probably won't find the same success as the Blue Oval's latest EV.
In ye olde combustion form, the Chevrolet Silverado is one of the most popular passenger vehicles on the US market. In modern electrified form, it's a jazzed-up, oversized family wagon that we feel loses that down-to-earth nature, no doubt thanks to an inflated $57,000 price tag. So how do you think Chevrolet can bring its electric pickup back in favour with a common Joe? Lower prices? No. The bow tie has gone the other way, in fact, and chosen to turn its, some would say, unpopular EV into a race truck. Because distraction is the best way to ease concerns over the cost of living crisis, right? This then is the Chevrolet Silverado EV ZR2 race truck concept, and as much of a mouthful that name is, it's the American manufacturer's latest attempt to get consumers on the electric side of the argument. Sporting thick 37-inch off-road tyres, a suspension lift kit with finely tuned dampers, strong underfloor armour plating and locking differentials everywhere, the Z or the ZR2 isn't just a marketing ploy. It turns out the Detroit-based car maker entered its race truck into the Mint 400 off-road race back in March. After 73 miles of grueling off-road terrain in the desert surrounding Las Vegas, the Chevy won the EV Open Production Class, a category welcoming modified versions of consumer vehicles. The fact that it was the only competitor in its class and finished the race in 42nd place out of 62 runners is perhaps less impressive. Where the standard Silverado EV gets a pair of motors good for a maximum output of 760 brake horsepower in its top trim level, the ZR2 sports a third motor and boosts power to 1100 brake horsepower. Helping it better navigate the desert are a few more visual off-roading modifications like a front bull bar and large spotlights on the roof, plus a race-ready livery that we can imagine electric truck owners trying to replicate. The Silverado EV race truck will obviously never be available to purchase, but it does preview a more off-road ready version of the Silverado bound for a summer unveiling. We'll have everything you need to know about that as soon as possible.
That's all we have time for this week, but if it's more off-road concepts you're after, Jeep has you covered. Don't miss that next week.